I was going from Ohio to Colorado, a trip I've made several times. Everything was fine until then. But soon after passing a gas station in a more isolated region of Illinois, the truck's GPS started acting strange. First it crashed, then it restarted itself and recalculated the route. The screen showed a new path, cutting through a road I had never seen before, but which seemed to shorten the journey considerably. As I was in a hurry and the weather was good, I decided to continue. The road started out quite normal, paved, without much traffic. But after about 20 minutes, the asphalt ended, and I turned onto a dirt road, lined with trees so tall they blocked the sky. Even though I thought it was strange, I kept going. The GPS still indicated that I was on the right path. But after a while, I noticed that the compass on the screen was spinning slowly, as if it didn't know where I was. I tried to check it on my phone, but I couldn't get a signal. Not a single bar. I started to notice that there were no more signs, no fences, no lampposts. Just that endless road, and a growing feeling that I was going somewhere I shouldn't. The forest around me seemed to get thicker with every kilometer. Even with the windows closed, I could feel the heavy air, as if the entire environment was pushing me forward, forcing me to keep going. The truck started to give some engine knocks, something that had never happened before. The GPS screen went black for a few seconds, and when it came back on, it showed a location called Aired Hollow. I've never heard of that. I ran that name through my head, trying to remember if it was some old village, some reservation, anything. But nothing. And when I looked around, I realized that the environment had changed. The trees were now more twisted, with thin branches that looked like pointing hands. The dirt road gave way to dark, almost black soil, and the daylight seemed faded, as if it were passing through an old filter. The only thing that didn't change was the arrow on the GPS, always pointing forward. I slowed down, trying to decide whether to turn back, but when I looked in the rearview mirror, the way back was simply gone. It was as if the road had disappeared behind me. Just forest, dense, dark, as if the place itself had erased my route. At that point, the GPS began to blink and repeat a message in a metallic voice: route found. Near destination. Route found. Near destination. On a loop, over and over. Each repetition got louder, more insistent. It made me break out in a cold sweat. I tried to turn the device off, but the button wouldn't respond. The screen flashed between the route and a distorted image that looked like my own face. At that moment, I began to think I was dreaming, or having some kind of freak out. But everything was too real. The steering wheel was hard in my hands, the burning smell that was beginning to spread inside the cabin, and the sound of the engine that now seemed more like a groan than a mechanical noise. It was then that I saw a building in the distance. Some kind of gas station, or maybe a small store, with a wooden sign hanging crookedly, impossible to read. I stopped in front of it, relieved to have found a sign of civilization. I got out slowly, looking around, and immediately felt that something was deeply wrong. Everything was too still. No wind, no sound, like an old, dusty photo. I entered the place, which looked like a grocery store, and noticed that the shelves were full, but with products that had expired decades ago. Faded colors, packaging that no longer exists. There was a counter, and behind it, a man stood still, motionless. His face covered in a shadow that the light from the dim lamp couldn't reach. I spoke to him, asked where I was, how to get out of there. He slowly raised his head and said only one sentence: "You've arrived where you needed to be." That froze me. I asked what he meant by that, but he was no longer there. I swear, I didn't hear any footsteps, I didn't see any exit. Just the empty counter, as if it had never existed. I ran out of the store, got into the truck, and as soon as I slammed the door, the radio turned on by itself. A calm female voice said, "Welcome to your destination." The GPS screen now showed a symbol in place of the route, a sort of eye made of twisted lines, pulsing red. I was ready to drive away, when I realized that the forest around me had changed again. Now, the trees had their trunks marked with symbols that matched the ones on the GPS. And among them, there were people. Standing. Staring. Expressionless. Some with clothes that looked like they were from another era. Others were completely naked, covered in dirt. All of them were motionless. I felt like I was being watched by something very ancient. Something that had brought me there on purpose. I tried to reverse, but the engine died. And with it, all the lights on the truck. I was left in total darkness, surrounded by that invisible presence, feeling the ground shake ever so slightly, as if something immense was waking up beneath me. I looked out the cab window, and right next to it, inches from the glass, the man from the store. Standing there, his face now visible. But it wasn't a human face. It was a mask made of pieces of glass and iron, like something put together by hands that had never known what a face was. He didn't blink. He just stared at me. I don't know how long I stood there, paralyzed, staring at that thing that only imitated a face. I was shaking, I couldn't move a muscle. But then it simply disappeared. It didn't walk, it didn't disappear into a mist, it just stopped being there. And at the same time, the truck started up by itself. The lights came back on. The radio went silent. The GPS turned off completely. And out of nowhere, the road reappeared behind me. Without understanding what was happening, I put the car in gear and started heading back. Little by little, the forest became less dense, the sky cleared, and the road returned to normal. It was as if I had left a place that shouldn't exist. When I finally reached the main highway, the GPS was still dead. But the clock on the dashboard showed 3 hours ahead of when I had turned onto that strange road. I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw, for a brief second, the red eye symbol etched into the dirt on the road. It blinked once and disappeared. I went straight to a gas station, ordered coffee, and tried to compose myself. I asked the attendant if he knew Aired Hollow. He looked at me strangely and said he had never heard of that name. That in that area, there was no village or road with that name. And there never was. And when I showed him the GPS, it was frozen, with no signal. He just said, "That thing is trying to show you something else." Since then, I have never trusted my GPS again. I use a paper map, ask for directions, write everything down. But sometimes it turns on by itself. Even when it is turned off, even when there is no power. And it always shows the same route. A path with no name. A destination with no return. Some nights, when I am driving alone, I hear that voice on the radio again, "You got where you needed to be." And I turn it off, close my eyes and keep going. Because I know that if I look at the map again, maybe I will go back there. The feeling is that that place is not behind me. He saw me. And now he knows where to find me. It's been a while since I stopped looking at the clock with peace of mind. I never thought a simple schedule could make me so upset. It all started with a delivery between Utah and Nevada. It was a long route, mostly in the dark, and I usually keep 2 watches in the truck in addition to the dashboard, a wristwatch and a digital one on the overhead dashboard. I've always been kind of obsessive about it. On the 3rd night on the road, I noticed they all stopped at the same time, 3:33 a.m. I thought it was a coincidence or a low battery. But the next day, I packed them both up, checked the cell phone signal, and at that very moment, everything froze again. That's when I started paying attention. The truck's dashboard would go out for a few seconds, the interior light would flash, and the radio would make a short hissing sound, as if it were picking up a transmission. Only it wasn't music or voice. It was like the sound of something scraping metal, something being pulled. And it was always at 3:33 a.m. At first I thought it was an electrical problem. I took the truck to Reno for a checkup. They replaced the wiring, ran tests. Nothing wrong. On the first trip after that, the problem came back exactly the same way. Same place, same sound, same time. And then things started to get worse. He had one night where, as soon as the clock stopped, I felt the air inside the cabin grow heavy. A kind of suffocating heat, like someone was breathing right next to me. I looked in the rearview mirror and saw something sitting in the back seat. Yes, in the bank that shouldn't even exist because this is a single cabin. But that night, there was a space there. A bench, and a silhouette. I couldn't see her face, just her shadow, but she was turned towards me. It didn't move. He just watched me. When I tried to turn back, the cabin light went out. And when I turned it on again, there was nothing left. I started noticing other things too. Sounds coming from outside, even when I was in the middle of the desert. Footsteps, as if someone was walking around the truck. And once, I heard 3 sharp knocks on the glass of the door, as if someone wanted to get in. But there was no one outside. The clock on the dashboard remained frozen, shining that 3:33 frozen in time. After that time passed, everything went back to normal. The clock started again, the engine kept running as if nothing had happened. But I knew. Something was happening during those minutes. Something that time seemed to be trying to hide. One night, I decided to film it. I left my cell phone recording, resting on the dashboard, with the camera facing me. I wanted to prove to myself that I wasn't going crazy. I woke up in the middle of the night to the hiss of the radio, and looked at the clock, frozen, 3:33. Everything was dark again. I sat in the cab, waiting. Nothing happened except that feeling of presence, the heavy air, the heat coming from nowhere. The next day, I went back to watch the recording. Up until the moment the clock stopped, everything was normal. But at 3:33, the video goes completely dark, and stays that way for exactly 7 minutes. When the image comes back, I'm asleep on the bench. But the detail that froze me was seeing, for a second, a hand resting on my shoulder. It wasn't mine. I showed the video to a fellow truck driver, who swore he saw something moving in the back of the cab during the pitch black. I asked him to rewind the video frame by frame, and during one of those pauses, a face appeared. Right behind me. Not a face, something that imitated a face. Sunken eyes, crooked mouth, skin that was too pale. That made me abandon the trip and go home. I didn't drive for days. But the feeling didn't go away. At home, I woke up 3 nights in a row at 3:33, with all the clocks in the house stuck at that time. Even the microwave. And one night, I saw the silhouette of my truck's cab through the living room window. Parked on the street. But I had left it in a garage of a repair shop, 15 kilometers away. I went back to the garage the same day and the truck was there, exactly where I left it. The mechanic said no one had stopped. And the weirdest thing was that the clock on the dashboard still showed 3:33. Whatever was following me, or watching me, seemed to no longer need the truck. It was with me. Wherever I was. And the more I tried to escape the time, the more it found me. I started having nightmares about dark tunnels and hallways that led to doors with the number 333 engraved on them. There was always someone on the other side. Always waiting for me to open it. I never did. It was only after I decided to get back on the road that I realized the final pattern. Every time the clock stopped, I felt the truck get heavier, as if it was carrying more than it should. A low sound of dragging chains came from beneath the bodywork. And one night, I stopped to check it out. I got up with a flashlight, lay down under the truck, and there were claw marks scratched into the metal, like something was getting stuck there. And engraved on the side of the rear axle, in what looked like something that had been burned into the steel, was just one word: arrested. After this discovery, I started to avoid driving at night. But somehow, even on daytime trips, the clock seemed to go crazy around 3:33 p.m., as if that presence had found a loophole in the time. I started to get severe headaches, always at the same time. A pressure behind my eyes, as if they were trying to force me to see something I shouldn't have seen yet. During one of these crises, I pulled over to the side of the road, put my head on the steering wheel, and closed my eyes. When I opened them, everything was dark again. Even though it was broad daylight. And there he was, sitting in the passenger seat. Staring at me. This time I could see better. His skin looked like melted wax, his eyes weren't eyes at all, they were black holes that pulled my attention inward. I felt dizzy, as if I were being pulled into him. And then he spoke. For the first time. He simply said, "It's not time yet." The voice was multiple, as if several mouths were saying it at the same time, but with a delay. I blinked hard and everything went back to normal. Clear day, empty road. But on the passenger seat, there was a mark. As if someone had been sitting there for a long time. Since then, no matter where I am, 333 has been following me. Clocks stop, radios crackle, and that heavy air returns. Sometimes I feel it walking behind me, even at home. I've thought about getting rid of the truck, abandoning everything. But I know it's not the vehicle anymore. It's time. That specific moment that, for some reason, was opened for me. Like a crack between worlds. And now, every 333, I have to face the possibility that maybe, one day, it will say, "Now is the time." And I won't wake up after that. So if you notice that the clocks around you have stopped, and it's exactly 3:33, don't try to understand. Don't try to film. Don't try to run away. Just wait. Because maybe you too have been chosen to see what no one else should see. It happened on the stretch between Arizona and New Mexico, on one of those early mornings when the sky seems too big and the silence is too heavy. It was about 2 in the morning, and I was driving down an endless straight road, with little lighting and not a soul in sight. I had heard strange stories about the area, strange lights, creatures, missing truck drivers, but I never paid them much attention. Until that night. I had my headlights on high, listening to an old song on the radio, when something passed in front of me. Not flying, not running. Crawling. Too fast to be an animal. Too big to be anything I knew. At first I thought it was a shadow of something. But then the headlights caught it full on, a dark, cylindrical shape that looked like it had scales, crossing the road from one side to the other in seconds. So fast that I almost lost control of the truck. The ground vibrated. Seriously. Not like an earthquake, it was like something huge was dragging its weight along the ground. The radio crackled, the dashboard flickered, and for a moment I felt the truck tilt as if something had passed underneath. When I pulled over to the side of the road, shaking, I thought I was having a seizure. Another truck even stopped behind me, and the guy ran out. He just said, "You saw it too, right?" We stood there, both of us standing in the dark, trying to understand what had just happened. The guy described exactly what I saw: a huge, dark snake, with no visible eyes, with skin that looked like rubber and metal at the same time. He said it was coming from far away, from the side of the mountain, and it crossed the road as if it were part of the desert. We stood there for a while longer, in silence. Neither of us wanted to move on right away. We turned on our CB radios to hear if anyone else had experienced this. And that's when another truck driver answered. With a shaky voice, he said, "Kilometer 234? It passed me last night. I thought it was the end." I got back into the truck with my heart racing. I started the engine, but I kept looking at the horizon, waiting for that thing to appear again. The road was silent, but the weather had changed. The air was thicker, heavier, and the radio started picking up strange sounds, like deep, drawn-out breathing. As if something huge was panting very close. Even though I was accelerating, I felt like I wasn't alone there. And when I looked in the rearview mirror, I swear, I saw a part of the asphalt move, as if a giant trail had just been opened behind me. I drove for almost 2 hours straight, without stopping. But I never managed to shake the feeling that the thing was still nearby. As if it had somehow stuck to me. At every bend in the road, every descent, I looked to the horizon hoping to see that shape again, cutting across the road like lightning. When I finally stopped at a gas station, I found 2 more truck drivers in the yard. Without even needing to explain, one of them said, "You saw the snake too, right?" And that's when I realized that it wasn't just me. That region had become the route of something that no one could explain, but everyone was starting to fear. One of them said that weeks ago, always between midnight and 3 in the morning, something huge passed by on the road. They said there have been tire blowouts, trucks turning over on their own, and even engines that suddenly cut out. Another said he saw the snake rising for seconds before disappearing into the desert, and that it had no eyes, just a giant opening that looked like a sewn-up mouth. I started to connect the dots with stories I had heard at old stops, road legends, the ones we laughed about at first, but that now made sense. And the detail that gave me goosebumps was that everyone, without exception, cited the same passage, between markers 231 and 236. I decided to avoid driving through there at night. But fate seemed to laugh at my decision. A few days later, I picked up an urgent shipment and had no other option. I got on that road with a heavy heart, and at 2:17 in the morning, the truck's dashboard went out. Everything, all at once. I was left with only the headlights and absolute silence. And then the ground shook again. It wasn't an illusion. I felt the steering wheel vibrate, the truck tilt as if it were being pushed from below. I looked out the window and saw, on the side of the road, the desert sand rising, forming a long trail, as if something was digging just below the surface. But there was no sound of digging. Just that low noise, like a dull growl. Then she appeared. Crawling along the side of the road, parallel to the truck. Gigantic. Longer than any animal I had ever imagined, her skin rippling as if it had a life of its own. Her color changed with the light, half gray, half green, with spots like closed eyes. For a second, I felt her looking at me. Without having eyes. And yet, I knew she saw me. Not as a man in a truck. But as an intruder. A passenger on her territory. The snake followed me for what seemed like hours. I wasn't breathing, I wasn't blinking, I just held the steering wheel so tightly that my hands were tingling. The truck shook with every movement. When it finally pulled away, gliding toward the desert, the ground stopped shaking. The power came back on. The dashboard was lit up, the radio was hissing, as if nothing had happened. But I knew it wasn't a coincidence. That creature knew exactly where I was. And it wasn't just crossing the road. It was patrolling. Marking its territory. I arrived at the next gas station in complete shock. I was shaking so much that I could barely get out of the booth. An attendant came to help me, and before I could even say a word, he said, "You passed through the snake section, right?" I was speechless. He said that many people stopped there like that. They all had the same expression. The same story. But no one had any footage, records, nothing. The devices always froze or turned off. As if she didn't want to be remembered. Or as if she only existed in the time she showed herself, and then disappeared from the real world like a ghost on the asphalt. Since then, I have completely avoided that area. I take longer trips, taking absurd detours, just to avoid passing through there. But sometimes, even from far away, I hear the noise. That low sound of something dragging in the desert. One night, stopped to sleep at a gas station in Colorado, I woke up to the same faint tremor. I looked out the window and saw the sand in the parking lot moving, as if something was passing underneath. Just for a second. Then everything went quiet. But then I knew. She is not stuck in that place. This thing, it follows those who saw it. The load was light, the destination was close, and the road was smooth. It was my last trip before retiring, after almost 40 years traveling around the country. The delivery was simple, a small, weightless box from a private sender. Nothing out of the ordinary. I picked up the order at a small distribution center in rural Iowa. The employee handed me the package with a strange expression, as if he wanted to say something, but he just wished me good luck. I laughed, thanked him, and left thinking I was just another newbie impressed by an old truck driver. The delivery address was on a farm in the south of the state, very isolated, in a rural area. I arrived at the place towards the end of the afternoon. A rusty iron gate was open and a dirt road led to an old, half-ruined house. It looked abandoned for years. Still, I checked the address. Everything matched. I honked the horn and waited. Nothing. I got out of the truck and walked to the porch. The wood creaked under my weight, and the smell of mold and damp earth was strong. I knocked on the door a few times, but no one answered. That's when I decided to walk around the house to see if I could find anyone. In the backyard, all I found was tall grass, old rotting furniture, and one of those old rope swings, turning slowly, even without the wind. I went back to the front of the house and, on some impulse, tried the doorknob. The door opened easily, as if it had been left unlocked on purpose. I entered, calling out for someone, feeling like an intruder but at the same time curious. The living room was a museum of time. Faded paintings, furniture covered in thick dust, a smell of abandonment and something I couldn't name. In the center of the living room table there was a fallen frame. I lifted it to take a better look. It was a black and white photo of a man smiling next to a truck. On the back, written in pen, Arthur, 1962. The name of the recipient of the package. Exactly as it appeared on the delivery receipt. That was when I noticed something that gave me goosebumps. On top of the photo, there was a spent candle, still with traces of melted wax. It was like a small improvised altar. I went back to the truck, picked up the box and placed it on the table. It seemed more appropriate to leave it there. When I looked at the package, I noticed that there was no return label, just the address and the name Arthur. I opened the lid on impulse. Inside, there was only a letter. A yellowed envelope, with the inscription, "For when he returns." That sent a chill down my spine. I looked around the house again, as if expecting Arthur to appear out of nowhere. But everything remained silent. Too silent. I sat on the chair in the living room and stared at the envelope for a while. I don't know why, but I had an overwhelming urge to open it. As if something was pulling me towards it. The handwriting was old, shaky, but firm enough to seem important. I finally gave in. I opened it slowly, feeling like I was violating something I shouldn't have. Inside was a single, handwritten sheet of paper with a short message, "Arthur, you can come back now." Everything is fine. We're waiting for you. No signature. No date. That was all. It gave me goosebumps. The handwriting seemed feminine, maybe from someone older. But that wasn't what bothered me. It was the content. It was as if the letter had been written to someone who never got to read it. I decided to take the envelope back to the box, and when I picked it up to close it, I noticed something I hadn't noticed before. On the bottom of the box, engraved in low relief, there was a strange symbol. A circle cut by a vertical line, with two horizontal lines in the center. It didn't look like a company logo or a well-known brand. Later, when I tried to search, I couldn't find anything. But at that moment, I felt a chill just touching it. When I turned to leave, I heard the noise of the rope swing outside. The same one that had previously only swung slowly. Now, it was spinning quickly, as if someone had just pushed it. I ran to the porch. The swing was still moving. I looked out at the field and I thought I saw someone entering the forest behind the house. A tall silhouette, with slow steps, as if he were returning home after a long time. I shouted, but no one answered. The figure disappeared into the darkness between the trees. I walked back to the truck in silence, and before starting the car, I looked back at the house. A dim light was now coming from the living room window. I swear I turned off all the lights when I came in. And the candle on the table was lit. Reflexively, I checked the clock. It was exactly 6:33 p.m. But the second hand didn't move. Stuck. I decided to leave without looking back. I drove to the next gas station and told the attendant the story. When I mentioned the name Arthur and the location of the farm, he turned pale. He said that the man had died in 1971, in an accident with his own truck, and that the house had been abandoned ever since. I asked him how he knew that, and he pointed to a frame on the wall of the gas station. It was the same photo. Arthur smiling next to the truck. And the attendant added, "You weren't the first one to try to deliver something there. But you were the only one who came back." I stood there for a while, staring at the photo. It was exactly the same image from the house. Same smile, same pose, as if that portrait had been frozen in time waiting for me. I walked back to the truck in silence, but the box was still there, on the passenger seat. I remembered leaving it at the house. I tried to convince myself that maybe I had taken it without realizing it, but it didn't make sense. I opened it again. The letter was gone. In its place was just a paper folded in four with a new message, written in the same handwriting, "Delivery received. Now rest." That's when I realized that, even though it was stopped, the truck was shaking slightly. As if something was moving underneath. I started the engine and drove away as fast as I could. I spent the next few days trying to forget, trying to rationalize everything. But every time I close my eyes, I see that candle burning. The dim light from the window. The silhouette disappearing into the forest. And, worst of all, the feeling that that delivery wasn't just for Arthur. It was for me too. As if that had been a passage. A kind of ritual. As if I had ended a cycle that was not just about work, but about life. I started to dream about the truck going alone on that dirt road, without a driver, just with the box on the seat. After a few days, I took the truck to the garage to officially end the lease. When the mechanic opened the dashboard to check a part, he found something strange. An old brass key hanging inside, tied with a red ribbon. No one could explain how it got there. I took it home and put it away, but since then, at 6:33 p.m., all the clocks in the house stopped working for exactly 2 minutes. Always. And for 2 minutes, I feel like someone is in the room. I don't hear anything. I don't see anything. But I feel it. As if someone is just watching me, waiting for me to say, "Now it's my turn to go back." Maybe it's just the paranoia of a tired old man. Or maybe it's the final warning that the next delivery is on its way. I just hope whoever receives it is prepared. Because some things, once we give them away, never come back to us. The storm started out of nowhere. Clear skies, and in a matter of minutes, a heavy downpour, the kind that makes it hard to see the road. I was driving along an empty stretch between Kentucky and Tennessee, just me, the asphalt and the sound of water hitting the truck's bodywork. It was almost midnight, and visibility was terrible. I slowed down and guided myself using only my eyes and intuition. That's when I saw her. A figure standing on the shoulder of the road, completely soaked, wearing a denim jacket and a backpack. She had her head down, shaking. I didn't think twice. I pulled over. She got in silently and thanked me in a barely audible voice. She was shivering from the cold, so I offered her a towel that I had left on the back seat. She said she was going to a neighboring city, about 30 kilometers away. I looked in the rearview mirror and only saw the wet road disappearing behind. We drove in silence for a few minutes. I tried to make conversation, to ask if I needed to tell anyone, but she only responded with, "No," or, "It's okay." When I looked at her again, I noticed that her jacket was still completely dry. I thought it was strange, but the bizarre weather that had been going on all night made me a little unsure about everything. When I looked to the side again, the seat was empty. I almost crashed the truck. I slammed on the brakes and stopped on the shoulder. I turned around, looked under the seats, called out loud for her. Nothing. No water marks on the seat, no sign that anyone had been there. I stood there for a while, with the sound of the rain drowning out everything, trying to understand. I thought I had hallucinated, that it was fatigue, I don't know. I turned on the radio to calm myself down and continued on to the next gas station. I got there, still dizzy, my head spinning. I ordered a coffee, sat down at the cafeteria, and when I went to the bathroom, I saw the poster. A crumpled piece of paper taped to the wall next to the sink. Missing, Rachel Lynn, 19. The picture was hers. Same face, same jean jacket. Same backpack. The date of her disappearance, 12 years ago. My knees gave out. I leaned against the sink, trying to make sense of it, but inside I already knew, that girl in the back of my truck, was no longer of this world. I went back to the gas station counter shaking, ordered another coffee, and didn't say anything to anyone. I just stared at the reflection of the rain on the window, waiting for my heart to slow down. But the strangest part was yet to come. When I got back to the truck and opened the passenger door to check, there was the towel I had given her. Wet. Very wet, as if it had just been used. But the bank was still dry. And inside the fold of the towel, I found a little silver chain, with a small star-shaped pendant. I picked it up carefully, not knowing what to do. It was too real. It had weight, it smelled like a faint perfume. It couldn't have been just imagination. I went back to the gas station and asked the attendant about the sign. He said that Rachel's family still lived in the next town over, and that her father put up new signs from time to time. He also said that other drivers had told me the same story. Some say she shows up when it rains heavily. Always alone, always quiet. That sent a chill down my spine. I asked if he knew her father, and he gave me the address. I don't know what came over me, but I decided to go there. I felt like I had to return the chain. I felt like it wasn't meant to be mine. I arrived at the simple house, at the end of a dirt road. A man greeted me, tired eyes, unshaven. When I showed him the chain, he froze. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. Only after a while did he manage to say, "We gave this to her on her birthday." We never saw it again. He thanked me as if he were receiving a piece of something he had lost. He asked me where I found it. I just said, "On the road." He nodded, without surprise. As if he had expected this. As if she was still trying to get home, even after so long. I got back into the truck with a heavy heart. I didn't say anything else to anyone. But ever since that night, every time I hit the road when rain is forecast, I keep the passenger seat clean. The towel is back in its usual place. And sometimes I swear I see a shadow out of the corner of my eye. When I really look, there's no one there. But the radio usually crackles at 11:47 p.m., the exact time she got into the truck. As if to say, "Thank you." As if, for a moment, she'd managed to get a little further than the night she disappeared. A few weeks later, I stopped on the same stretch of road, this time during the day. No rain, no sign of anything unusual. I just wanted to see the place again, as if I needed to prove to myself that everything had really happened. I pulled the truck over to the shoulder and got out. The silence was different, dry, hot, dust in the air. But there, where she had climbed the last time, I saw something that paralyzed me, small footprints, like those of women's sneakers, lightly marked in the wet earth from a rain that, according to the radio, hadn't even fallen in that region. Those marks started in the bush and stopped right at the edge of the road. Where she stood that night. The following week, I heard another trucker comment on the CB radio about a girl in the rain who disappeared when he went to get a jacket from the back seat. He was shaking, his voice cracking. I didn't need to ask who it was. I just turned off the radio. I felt like that story was now a part of me. Like she was choosing certain drivers, certain moments. As if you were still waiting for a journey that never ended. And deep down, a part of me understands. The road is long, and sometimes, we just want to get home. Since then, I have never doubted anything I was told along these routes. I never laughed at ghost stories again. Because I lived one. I saw her eyes. I felt the presence. I carry the memory of that night as if it were a second name. And when the rain starts, even if it's light, I already know, the radio will crack, the towel will be slightly damp, and the clock will show 11:47 p.m. And all I can do, is keep driving. In silence. With the passenger seat ready. Maybe one day she will reach her destination.